There it is. All right. So prayers and Saturday morning services. I want to actually have you think about something else to start with. I don't know all of you. And so I'm going to ask, like, what is a kind of extracurricular activity, whether it's a sport or a kind of music or art that you might do, or some other way that you spend not necessarily your free time exactly, right? But like time to do other things besides school and whatever responsibilities you might have at home. So who would like to go first? Dan, or you're all right. The Medved House. Tell everyone your name and what it is that you.
My name is Max Medved, and I like to draw chalk all of my drawing. Even the rain likes to do it.
Excellent. You like to draw chalk. Okay. And somebody else.
My name's Miriam, and I like to read.
To read. Okay.
My name's Debbie, and I play softball.
Softball. Okay.
My name's Sarah, and I do ballet.
Sarah, ballet. All right. So I'm going to be honest and tell Max and Miriam that like what I'm going to try doesn't work perfectly well for reading or for drawing with chalk, but I think maybe you could kind of get us there, that like there are times when you are reading without paying attention. You're just kind of like just enjoying the learning about a character and seeing what happens. And there are times when you're actually like, wait, I want to know who's who and what's happening and where they are. Or when you're drawing with the chalk, that you're just like seeing what happens. And there are other times when you want to make a picture for somebody else to see. Debbie and Sarah, I think you might be familiar with like the difference between a practice and a performance, right? Right. So whether that's a game or a kind of recital or some one of those moments, for all of us, I want you to think of Saturday morning services as that special, more intense version of what you might otherwise be doing the rest of the time. So there are practices for softball. There might even be a scrimmage, but that's different than playing in a game, right? Same thing, ballet, lots of practice, right? Both in the studio and on your own. And then a recital or a kind of performance where you're dancing for an audience. If you're reading and you need to kind of like tell people all about what you just read, so like that moment of kind of really, or if you're reading out loud to somebody else, which I know some of the grown-ups have probably done, right? And Max, if you were going to show someone your art, your drawing in chalk, how those are a little bit different, right? So Saturday morning is that performance time, which means that all that other stuff, right, counts actually, but maybe not the way we appreciate. So like, what's the benefit of practicing? How do you feel about practice? Let's start with that. Do you always like practice?
Hold on.
No. Okay. Is it still like helpful? Max, you wanted to say something?
When you practice, you be perfect. There's
Yes.
an old saying.
It is an old
Practice
saying.
makes perfect.
There's a new version of that saying, which is practice makes permanent. So if you practice the wrong thing, you're going to remember the wrong thing, right? So practice is real. right? And if you want to get to that perfection, right, you have to use your practice well. And so what I want to show you tonight in our first session is the way in which the Saturday morning service is building on what the rabbis assume is practice. Okay, so I'm going to show you this crazy outline and you're gonna be like, what? Or I was like that and I'm a rabbi, so I'm assuming it might be even stronger for you, okay? But then we're gonna break it down, we're gonna make it smaller, right? And figure out what's going on in each part. So if we knew what the practice was, then we can see how the performance or the game, right, that version should be a little extra special. And then I'm gonna have to, not this week, but next week, in particular, we're gonna like turn it into a kind of championship version of whatever the performance was for the game, right? So that we're gonna take it from like extra special for Shabbat to like super special because yes, it's Shabbat, and also, right, and one day it will be your bar or bat mitzvah. So are you ready to see this crazy outline? Okay. Max, I like that enthusiasm. Here we go. I'm going to share my screen and I think this is it. Okay. It doesn't even all fit on the screen. So it goes all the way up to there. All right. So let me get my little tool here. Tonight, we're going to focus on just from here, okay, from this part of the page, right, we're going to kind of build our way, squiggling along up to, oh, actually, I'm going to try to get all the way to, I take it back. We're going to try to get this far, right? We're going to stop here. So let me get rid of some of my drawing here and erase this part of the line. Oops. Okay. So we're going to start in this section. Oh, I'm still erasing. Draw. We're going to draw. Here we go. We're going to start here. Okay, and then shift into this section. And truthfully, these two are the warm-up. So even when it's a practice, you still have to stretch a little bit, right? Especially if you're doing a sport or ballet as a kind of sport. And then there's like the sort of major content that is going to take place in this section. Okay, this is a major content. And that's all before we get to the Torah, which is again like our performance championship level experience. And all of that has nothing to do with also all this extra stuff that's up here, right? And if I go back down to all this stuff that's down here. So I'm going to make it a little bit more simple and focus on a smaller version, which is this one. All right, not ready for that. I want that. Okay. Let me make sure you're seeing the same thing I am. Are you seeing just Birchot HaShachar and Pesukei de Zimra? Okay. So again, forget all that other stuff. We have to get started somewhere. And the same concept actually is going to apply, this whole idea of like getting ready and warming up. So we said it's like taking the practice and assuming you've already done all that when you get to the game. So basically the same. Sorry about that. Basically the same is the weekday version. So if we were the kind of Jews who went to services every single morning, we would be familiar with a lot of what happens first thing in the morning on a Saturday, because it's the same. It's not, we haven't made a distinction that it's Shabbat yet, but you know what, it is Shabbat. So we're gonna do additional Psalms when we get to Psukei de Zimra, right? And even then, right, we're gonna have a special extension that makes it even a little bit longer or more special. What are those components? How does that look in the prayer book? Let me stop sharing so you can actually, so right in this Siddur that those of you who have made it through third or fourth grade, you got a decorated version of, with your own personal cover. What does all of that look like? So here is a different, oh wait, I'm not ready to share yet. Here's a different way of looking at all of that. Share this, Shabbat morning. Okay, so we're gonna focus first on that preliminary service. Okay, and when we do so, there are, in essence, 3 parts to it. Okay, one is the stuff that really could happen at home. We don't need to go to synagogue for, but because we're going to be in synagogue, it's nice to kind of remember what those prayers were. The next is like, but actually, wait, we are together. Let's recognize that, and the key kind of component to the way our rabbis have us understand being together is to think of that as creating an experience of holiness. Okay, so we have stuff that we would do at home, but we're going to do together. Then we have this like, oh, we are together. Let's like make this holy. And then we have that part that's called Psukei de Zimra, which translates into verses of song. And in fact, right, there's usually singing. And I just want to be clear for everybody that because of COVID and switching to Zoom and all that sort of, Rabbi Bitron and Kentor Levin, they took all of this out, right? They just skipped this section and they come in starting around page 104, which I'm just, right, this is gonna be I'll do like this, right? So this is where we've been starting services. You can't even see that anymore. Change the highlight to a different color. Purple. Okay, so we've been starting at page 104 because Zoom, it can be really long to be on going through all these different things. And I don't want tonight to be too long for any of you either. So before I get into each of these sections and we kind of break it down, questions about this sort of taking the bigger picture of that whole trajectory, that whole kind of long list of different parts, and now breaking it into this. Are you good so far? I see some smiles and head nods. Okay. So the first piece of our tefillot, of our prayers, is modeh or moda ani, where we thank God for returning our soul to us. Any idea why we would start there? Oh yeah, Max, what do you think?
It honors God for all the things we like to do.
All right, that's pretty good. So it's honoring God for all the things we like to do. I'll tell you what, the Birchot HaShachar, number 3, under the at-home prayers, the morning blessings, that is not just what we like to do, but all the things we're able to do. So this number 1, modeh moda ani, is a little bit extra. There's something special going on there. And it has to do with the part where we say, Shehechezarta bi nishmati, who returned into me, my soul. The rabbis had this idea that when we're sleeping, who knows what's happening? Where do our dreams come from? They had big questions. I don't know if you ever wondered about your dreams. Anyone ever wonder about their dreams? Yeah, right? So Devi, the rabbis wondered too, and they thought maybe it's our soul left us, went traveling somewhere. And how wonderful it is when we wake up in the morning, even if it's at like 3 o'clock in the morning and we go back to sleep and then we wake up for school. We wake up and, oh, we're back to normal, even if we have some sort of memory of that dream. So, so we start with waking up and actually our soul is still in us, right? Sometimes we're still sleepy, and sometimes, we kind of have to like transition. But once we've woken up and we recognize that we're like functioning, the first thing we're supposed to say is modeh or moda'ani, thank you for returning my soul to me. And then again, because we're kind of doing this in synagogue, even though we could have done it at home, we sing Ma Tovu, which is about how the Israelites, when we were traveling in the desert, we were living in tents, and somehow we all had privacy, even though there were millions of us all camping together. We somehow were able to turn our tents in such a way that we had privacy. And then to Max's point, there are all these things we can do that we should honor God and say thank you for. So Birchot HaShachar actually starts with the fact that we can recognize the dawn, remarking how the rooster can do that for us, and then, for ourselves. And there is a slightly different kind of version of how the next couple prayers are presented, depending on like the tradition, Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, in which you find yourself. So the Conservative Siddur, which we use at Bethel, has 3 blessings in a row that are phrased in the positive. Thank you, God, for making me in God's image, for making me a Jew, and for making me free, a free person. The Orthodox version has it in the negative. Thank you, God, for not making me, it's supposed to be men say, not making me a woman, and women are supposed to say, for making me according to your will. You can see why with conservative Judaism's egalitarianism and appreciation for all that women do, right? We changed it to in our image, in God's image, to the positive. And who didn't make me a member of other faiths or nations, and then who didn't make me a slave. So instead of those negative versions, we phrase it in the positive. And then we get back to the whole like waking up. Pokeach Ivrim, that we can open our eyes. Malbish Arumim, that we have clothing that we can put on. Matir Asurim, that we can actually move around, like when we get out of bed, we're free to walk around to the degree that we are abled that way. Zokef Kefufim, that we're not bent. And then appreciation of nature, that we can see the horizon, that we have food and shelter, that we can go about our daily tasks. We can actually kind of go from one place to another, right? Capping off with the idea that either Shabbat or tefillin that we would wear on a weekday, the leather boxes, are like a crown. And then lastly, in case we're still tired, who gives strength to those who are tired, right? And to like just make sure anyone ever like you find you have kind of crust in your eye in the morning? Yes? Okay. So there's even a blessing as part of Birchot HaShachar where we say, who moves sleep from our eyes, right? And from our eyelids, slumber from our eyelids. And that crust that sometimes forms from our tear ducts and allergies and whatever else, like that's what we mean. We take that off, right? We scrape it away, and we're able to kind of be more awake in that moment. So all of this is like just waking up, starting to function, and saying thank you to God, using Max's language, right, to honor God. Questions so far? Okay. When we do Birchot Shachar, usually it's like a little bit of a response with the congregation so that we're kind of also feeling each other out. We're kind of seeing who's in the room. Because again, the next thing that comes up is this idea of holiness. So when we turn the page, there's private meditations that the rabbis actually, the ancient rabbis recorded in the Talmud, and the Siddur brings some of those in this moment. One of them is actually my favorite. It's where'd it go? It starts off with this idea that like we're as humans we're worth nothing. We're like the dust, and then but actually, right? We're worth a whole lot more because we are descendants of Abraham and Sarah and part of this covenant, and we're able to bring good into the world. And so we go from this like not really sure what we're doing to reminding ourselves and reminding God that we have a lot to offer. Then we say Shema and have a blessing of holiness before we turn that page again. Okay, so just letting the Rohatch family join us. Welcome. So then you'll see what I have here is an opportunity for us to say the Psalm for Shabbat. Actually, on any given morning, we're supposed to say the Psalm for that day. And on page 81, we would say Psalm 30. When I say, I really mean the beginning and the end, mumble, mumble, mumble. But it's an opportunity to kind of remind us where we are in the calendar and, right, to kind of cap off this warm up. Mourner's Kaddish I have in a kind of salmon color. Any idea why? Max, give it a try. Tell me why.
Because it's honored for dead people who are Jewish.
Interesting. Yes, it's for Jews to say, but I will tell you, we can also say Kaddish for people who are not Jewish, who passed away, because it's about us, right? And the mourner's Kaddish, yes, is a way of honoring those who've died. I put it in pink, and you'll notice also the Chatzi Kaddish is in pink or in salmon color. And if I scroll down further, the Kaddish Shalem is in the same salmon color. Any other guesses to why I went out of my way to color it?
Optional.
That it's optional. So there's one thing for sure, which is that we don't do it if we don't have a minyan. We actually have to have a quorum of 10, adult Jews, and so it's something that we might skip if we're by ourselves. It's kind of like a commercial break. It's a stopping point. It's sort of like, if you were getting too excited about whatever video you were watching on YouTube and then they cut to an ad, the Chatzi Kaddish is there to remind us, no, we're actually here for God, not for ourselves, right? We're actually here to kind of come together and to do something special. And so I'm going to stop you right at this point, right? So that we can focus on holiness. The word Kaddish is like Kadosh or Kiddush, like for Friday nights when we pull out our wine or grape juice. So we're going to stop and create holiness. And we do that in the very beginning, right, to give space for those who are in mourning, right, to remember their loved ones, and right, to mark a big pause. That pause for the Mourner's Kaddish on page 82 helps us to get ready for Psukei de Zimra, the verses of song. Okay, and now I have a different color highlight. The different color highlight here is something pretty subtle that I have yet to see kind of taught actively, but I think it's a useful thing for you to know. So Baruch She'amar is the opening blessing that Yishtabach, all the way 40 pages later, or almost 40 pages later, is the closing blessing for. And everything that comes in between, all this 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, is the songs or the verses of song that we're singing. But we start with a special blessing. And the Baruch She'amar, there's actually an ancient, by ancient I mean from around the year 600, description of prayers where we're told that the cantor would come into the synagogue space, and usually in that kind of society, because it was in Babylonia, which would later become Persia, the cantor would be in the middle of the congregation. They would go up, and they would say each line, and everyone would respond Baruch Hu. So we tend to go Baruch She'amar v'haya ha'olam, Baruch Hu, Baruch Oseh v'reshit, Baruch Omer ve'oseh, and we just go back and forth, maybe singing the whole paragraph everyone together, or back and forth line by line. But the first known recorded, kind of version of this is that, again, the cantor or whoever is leading services would say each line, and everyone would respond Baruch Hu, so that we would kind of like all be coming together and start to sing and get excited before then, right, saying the blessing at the end of that page 83, which has Melech Mehulal Batish Bachot, blessed are you, Adonai, sovereign, who's magnified with songs of praise. And now let's sing some songs, right? And there are actually many, many more than I put on this list, because we don't do all of them usually in synagogue, like it would take us all morning. So we'll do Ashrae. Typically, we would mumble this particular Ashrae because we're going to do the full one later at the Torah service. But it's right there. We do it twice. We're supposed to do it 3 times a day, twice in the morning and once in the afternoon. And so this is our first of the 2 in the morning. Psalm 150 then becomes like our next key piece. And this is the Hallelujah, and it ends with Kol Hanshama Tehallel Hallelujah, which sometimes is sung Kol Hanshama Tehallel, Kol Hanshama Tehallel, Kol Hanshama Tehallel, Hallelujah. But what I need you to know is Psalm 150 is the last of the Psalms in the book of Psalms. So symbolically, we're trying to say, we did them all, right? That's why we do the last one, is to say like, check, did them all. And what else? But Ashrae, how is Ashrae also like saying all of them? Any ideas? No ideas of Ashrae, like how it counts as also everything? What's the structure of Ashrae? Yeah, the Gebels. Go ahead, Debbie, tell me.
It's in alphabetical order.
Yes, it uses almost every letter of the Aleph Bet. It's Ashrei, Oshrei, V'Tef, and then
except for one. It's either a resh or a nun. I think
it's the nun. The nun is missing. So we do Aromim Chel HaYamelech, B'chol Yom Avarchecha, Gadol. We do Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, all the way down the list of all the letters, skipping nun because of all kinds of potential reasons that have to do with it, kind of like when you spin nun on your dreidel, nothing happens, right? So we don't want to suggest any nothingness to God. We want God's presence. So Ashrae uses every letter, and Psalm 150 is the last. So by doing these 2 different pieces of Psalms, we accomplish the entirety. Okay. And then again, a kind of, the Song of the Sea is actually part of the normal morning service. But it's an extension that, and I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure that at Bethel they do it every Shabbat when things are normal. But it's the original song that Miriam and Moses sang with the Israelites when they crossed the Reed Sea. And what comes right afterwards, I put the page number in purple, is still an extension of all of these ideas of singing, because Nishmat Kol Chai is basically saying that even just our breath, like as is a continuation of Psalm 150, Kol Hanshama Tehalelia, every breath is praise of you, God. Now we're saying Nishmat Kol Chai, the breath of every living creature is also praise. And that takes us into some poetry. Ilu Pilnu Male Shirakayam, could song fill our mouth as waters fill the sea, up until we get to this other material, Shochanad, and then Yishtabach again with the closing paragraph, the closing blessing that ends El Melech Gadol Batishbachot, God, great King of praises, of blessings. How they say, Sovereign of wonders, crowned with adoration, delighting in our songs and praise. Right, so we thank God for enjoying us having done all these other things. Right, before again a Chatzi Kaddish, which is our commercial break to remember this is all holiness. So let me ask you, going back to this whole idea of needing to stretch or to do a warm-up before you get to the real game, what would be the purpose of having all of this, almost a whole page of notes of outline before we ever get to the actual morning service? Not sure? Well, I'll say this, that the rabbis tell us that there were some pious folks back 2,000 years ago, and they felt like they couldn't do the morning service if they hadn't warmed up. So whether you're going to do a play performance or you're going to be, and you need to kind of get your lips going, they'll me, and some other, there's some sort of drama games you can play to kind of just get comfortable. The same thing, stretching before you actually use your body for a sport or dance. Psuke de Zimra is meant to get us going, to get us used to saying all these words. So one of the interesting things that might actually be really true for anyone who's there is they're not actually paying attention to what they're saying. They're just going through the words and the motions to kind of get ready to then give greater meaning, greater attention to what comes next, the morning service. Now, ideally, we're actually enjoying these songs of praise. And of course, we want to have actual gratitude in the morning. So the structure of starting with oh, yes, thank you for all these things. And oh, yeah, we're together. This is holy. And let's get started. Let's try getting everyone to kind of just stretch a little bit and get ready. That all works in a way to get us going. The other thing I would suggest too is that I don't know how many of you have noticed that when we're in person, so it's been a little while since we were doing this, right? A lot of people won't show up to services until 10:15. Does that sound about right? Services start at 9:30, but there's an extra crowd who arrives late. Yes, right? And again, it's been a year or so since you may have been to a full Shabbat morning service, but for those of you who have older children or siblings who've been through the bar bat mitzvah process, this is a chance for the community to also get the room ready to bring in more people. It's possible to show up somewhere around Shema or even the Amidah and be ready, because the heart of the matter for a Shabbat morning is going to be the Torah service, and that's like the championship level stuff. So you can show up ready to play, right? There are times when you don't have time to stretch, and you come in and you just make the best of it. But hopefully, like the rest of the team or the people who run the place where you're going to be performing, whether it's the field or a stage, like they're ready for you. And that's sort of what's going on here. One last thing before we kind of move into the morning service is this purple. So when we have multiple people leading the service, we usually actually change leaders right at Nishmat Kol Chai, because it's taking us, again, from the actual psalms and verses into a more poetic space that then becomes the introduction to the service. And Shulchan Ad Marom is this sort of like big marker for when we're ready to do that. And what's really neat is if you pay close attention on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, or on any of the festivals like Sukkot, Shavuot, and Passover, if you're in services on those mornings, they'll actually start in a different place. So on the high holidays, instead of starting at Shulchan Ad, we start at HaMelech, HaMelech, which is 6 words before that. And on a festival, we start 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, like 15 words before, with Ha'el B'Tatsumotu Zecha. And we use a different melody for that transition that would come, again, as part of this whole Nishmat into Yishtabach passage. So we use a melody and a different starting point to say it's Shabbat, it's high holidays, it's a festival, and you can tell from where we start and from the melody. Okay, questions before we move on to the morning service? Good. Okay, so I'm gonna shift images here for a minute. Got it. Take care, Debbie and Monica. And I'll send what I'm about to show you or show everyone else. So I'm going to change images to kind of make this a little bit more friendly. And oh, I shrank it, so I have to bring it back up. Hold on. Open. Here it is. Okay, so now hopefully this will let me share the right thing. This is a camp Siddur, and it's helping us to understand how Shema works, which is to say that Shema always appears with blessings before and after. 2 blessings before, wait, I don't know if you can see that. 2 blessings before, we have Yotzer Or and Ahava Rabbah in the morning. At night, it's Mariv Aravim and Ahavat Olam. But it's the same idea of the light or darkness of creation. So light in the morning, darkness at night, and love both morning and at night, followed by the Shema with all 3 paragraphs. And then Ga'al Yisrael, which you can see here in the English, is about saving us. So the structure is like, hey, everybody, Baruch Hu, right? And then these 2 pieces of introductory blessing to get us ready for Shema, Shema itself, and connecting Shema to God's sort of saving power in the past, in history. Okay, and again, this is the sort of like the rabbis assume you know this, even if you haven't been studying particularly for Saturday morning services. This is kind of like the structure of every morning Shema. Questions about this? No? Okay. If I go back to our other document, if I go back to this one, oops. No, not that one, sorry. Shabbat morning structure, here we go. If I go back to this big crazy one, you can, let me make that larger. You can see that Shema and its blessings also has this extension of the first blessing called Yotzer. Okay, so that's where we're going to sing. El Adon al kol ha'masim baruch v'vorach v'ficho neshama. Right? You remember that one? Sounds somewhat familiar. Maybe. You'll learn it before it's time for you to lead it. So the extension, let me go back to our outline. The extension is what makes, right, our page numbers kind of increase. So we start with Baruch Hu, and right after Baruch Hu is Yotzer Or Uvrei Choshech Oseh Shalom Uvrei Hakol. But then we have like 3 pages, including the El Adon, which is just a poem that was written in like the year 1200, or more, I mean, give or take 50 years, right? That we add, and we add it because it has every letter of the alphabet, El Adon, right? Baruch Mvorach, Gadol V'tuvo, Dat Uvuna. You can hear the use of each of the letters of the alphabet, all the way until we get to Or Chadash. So Or Chadash becomes the prayer of light, right? That concludes that opening blessing for all 3 pages. So, and then we get into Ahava Rabbah. Again, so we have creation and light, and we do it extended on Shabbat because Shabbat is the last day of creation. It's sort of a logical kind of moment. And then we do Ahava Rabbah. Does anyone know like some special kind of choreography, something we're supposed to do with our bodies or with the things we have with us in the middle of Ahava Rabbah, right before we get to the Shema? Miriam, it looked like your mom knew the answer. Right? Maybe? No? Okay, so one of the great experiences of being bar bat mitzvah is you get to wear a talit for the first time as an adult and to take on that responsibility, that mitzvah. And so there's this beautiful passage and begins V'havienu l'shalom me'arba kanfot haaretz. Sometimes we mumble it. Sometimes it's sung in the same sort of melody as Hava Rabbav Tanu. But often we change the melody to sound like Hatikva, because what we're saying after the prior parts of Ahava Rabbah is God, gather us from the 4 corners of the world, right? And bring us to our land, meaning Israel. So oftentimes in synagogue, we'll use the melody of Israel's national anthem to kind of like bring that idea of the 4 corners of the world, the 4 corners of our talit. We gather all 4 tzitzit and bring them together, right? And we're doing it with a melody that reminds us of Israel. And so it's this like moment in which our bodies and our clothing and the words are actually meant to kind of mirror our hope for, right, some future experience of the world. And that makes us really ready for saying Shema Yisrael, listen, the people of Israel, right? Not actually the land or the state, the country, right? But, right, the people of Israel. and then we do Shema with Ve'ahavta and the other paragraphs. And I don't want to minimize them, but I'm assuming they're kind of, a known quantity. And when we finish Shema, the person who's leading it will say, Adonai Elohechem emet. That last word, emet, is truth. It's the first word of the line of the paragraphs that come after. And so we talk about God's truth and how in our kind of mythic history, so not necessarily like facts, truth, but the truth that we understand of how this all has meaning for us and tells the story of the Jewish people. That truth we bring to the Exodus from Egypt, and we sing Mi chamocha ba'ilim Adonai, Mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, which is also in the Song of the Sea, right? And then we talk about a new song, Shira Chadasha, Shibichu Geuli Mishpah al Sfat Hayam. And then the moment in which we stand up, Tzur Yisrael, Kuma Be'esrat Yisrael. So we call on God as the Rock of Israel, who established with help Israel, right? And we sing the blessing that ends Ga'al Yisrael, thanking God for being in the past our Redeemer. And what's interesting is that the rabbis are very kind of careful here. They want us to connect directly, which is why I put it in green, Ga'al Yisrael, right into the Amidah. They want us to not stop. They don't put a Kaddish here. You don't need a reminder of holiness. You are talking about God saving us. There's nothing bigger and better than that. Go right into the Amidah. Typically at Bethel, people will pray individually. They'll kind of do their own version of the Amidah, 3 steps back, 3 steps forward. The Avot, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avoteinu, right? Elohei Avraham Elohei. You do that whole page, and then continue on individually. And then the whoever's leading services, or it's been Cantor Levin for however many years, right? We'll do a repetition, and the repetition goes back to Avot and then includes the Kiddusha, because the Kiddusha is something we do. Again, it's Kadosh. It's almost like it should be in salmon color, because it's a reminder of the holiness, but it's a holiness that requires us to kind of really draw it together. And one of the things I taught in our tefillah class for 5th through 7th grade is that we try to actually be like the angels. And so Isaiah tells us that the angels were calling to one another, so we look to each side, and we go up on our tiptoes for each word kadosh, because the angels were flying. Ezekiel tells us they had wings, and we stand with our legs together, because Ezekiel says actually the angels only had one leg, and the closest we can get to one leg is to put our legs together, right? All of that choreography is our trying to be like the angels. And then there are these series of blessings. And so I call them the 7 blessings, but in truth, the 7 blessings start with Avot and the Kiddusha, a blessing for holiness. And then we have a kind of series of paragraphs. Yismach Moshe, where we talk about Moses being happy. We sing B'Shamru, which we know from getting ready for Kiddush on Saturday. There's another paragraph about God not giving Shabbat to the whole world, and then also a sense of giving us Shabbat rest before sort of the concluding blessings that are the same for every Amidah, every 3 times a day, including priestly blessing and prayer for peace, Sim Shalom. Then usually we sing Oseh Shalom to end. And when we've done the Amidah, which is a really big, right, this is what we came to services for, then we have our Kaddish Shalom, our kind of commercial break. Before I take any questions or comments or questions, concerns, like the Shema and its blessings and the Amidah, that's the ball game. Like that's the recital. And that's like what we are really coming to services to do. But because it's Saturday, right, we have the Yotzer extension, and we change actually 18 blessings into 7. And all of that is going to lead into something even more important, which is the Torah. Questions or comments?
Granola. What can I make myself?
No? You're all good? Is this helpful? Right, because I'll be honest, I feel like normally when we do tefillah, we're making 2 assumptions. One is that in class, we'll teach you a specific prayer and you'll know how it fits in, right? Or we'll refer to its part in the service, but we won't necessarily tell you much more than that. The other thing we'll assume is, oh, you're in services. We're on page 110. So you know where we are. But like, that doesn't actually tell you what the flow is, right? So what we talked about today is the getting ready, right? For just setting the whole room and getting our spirit in shape, doing the key part that like we're supposed to do every morning, but doing it on Shabbat. And then next Tuesday night, I'm going to break down the Torah service. And maybe what I'll do actually for that is I think I have a scan of this. So I'll try to just, instead of showing you an outline, I'll show you page by page the actual blessings. I'll show you right from the Siddur what we're doing, and we'll get a little bit more into why. Torah, Haftarah, prayer for our country, the Mishaberach for those who are ill. Like, what is that all about? Why are we doing all that in the Torah service? And then in 2 weeks, in our last session, we'll do Musaf, which is the additional service, again, also specific to Shabbat and holidays. And I'll include, any other situations like if anyone has a mincha, bar bat mitzvah, or you do a different day of the week, we can kind of cover some of that material too. But this is again, like, not just the like, oh, we're on this page, and not just, right, learn how to sing Shema or how to lead El Adon or Ashrae. This is like where all the pieces fit together. And the last thing that I'll say is that in addition to the recording, I'm going to make sure that Sarah Lloyd, who works in the office, has each of the documents that I showed you, the full outline, but also that picture, and also the Shema from the camp prayer book, so that you can kind of follow along a little bit more detail. And I hope that this is again helpful. Please feel free to email me with any comments or questions. I'm going to throw my email in the chat. Oops, I sent it to the wrong. There we go. And let me know, how we can expand upon this and make it work for you. All right.